50 million people died in 2 years. No world war, no weapon, no army you can name, no pandemic. Just 2 years. Most viewers can name the famous battles of history. Few can name the deadliest catastrophe they were never taught about. Historians can tell you who invented the phonograph in 1877. Most cannot tell you why 50 million people disappeared. Imagine your country losing half its population in 2 years, and no one teaching it in school. This is not a theory. This is the archive, and it starts with one name. His name was Chidu. He was a farmer in the Madras Presidency, what is now southern India. He does not appear in history books. He appears on one page of a famine relief census from 1877, recorded by a British administrator named William Digby. Digby noted Chidu's village. He noted that when he returned, 11 of 17 families were gone. One document from that census described how many calories a starving person was allowed to receive. We will come back to that. But as Digby rode through these dying fields, he noticed something else, something that makes no sense. The grain ships were loading. But weather alone does not explain what happened next. To understand why 11 of Chidu's 17 neighbors disappeared, we have to look at the Pacific Ocean, because in 1876, the planetary weather machine broke down. The trade winds, the giant belts of air that move heat across the equator, simply stopped. Warm surface water drifted back toward South America, heating the Pacific across thousands of miles. Climatologists call this El Niño, but in 1876, it became a monster. Climatologist Deepti Singh, writing in 2023, described it as the strongest El Niño in the modern instrumental record. When the ocean heats like this, the air above it shifts the path of the global jet streams. It triggers teleconnections, a chain reaction where a pressure wave in the Pacific locks a dome of dry, hot air over the entire tropics, not in one place, in 3 continents at once. India first. The Indian summer monsoon is not a metaphor. It is survival. It is the mechanism by which 600 million people ate. The rains arrive in June, moving northeast across the subcontinent. Every farmer watches the sky in May because everything depends on those rains. In 1876, the rains did not arrive. In 1877, they did not arrive again. 2 consecutive monsoon failures. The wells that had fed villages for 500 years cracked at the bottom. The soil turned to powder. Across an area the size of Western Europe, the crops failed. Not a bad harvest. Total failure. 12 million people faced immediate starvation. If this were happening only in India, it would be a tragedy. But the same atmospheric teleconnections were already reaching China, and there the count was different. In the Shanxi, Henan, and Shandong provinces, the grain heartland of the Qing dynasty, the same atmospheric disruption brought a drought not seen in recorded Chinese history. But in China, there was a detail I did not expect to find in the records. The Qing government knew the famine was coming. They had a system, a grain reserve network called the Ever-Normal Granaries, built over centuries specifically for emergencies. In 1877, those granaries were empty. They had been quietly drawn down for decades to fund other priorities. The safety net existed on paper. The grain did not. The Yellow River dropped so low it could be crossed on foot. The Les Plateau cracked and blew. Shanxi province alone lost millions of people. Some districts lost 50% of their population. Half the people gone. The Chinese called this the Dingwu famine. In some villages, travelers reported passing through settlements where they heard no sounds, no children, no animals. Nothing moved. But it was not just Asia. The Pacific was pulling the life out of the southern hemisphere as well. In northeast Brazil, the Grande Seca had begun, the Great Drought. The same trade wind disruption had pulled the rains away from coastal Brazil. The dry scrubland of the interior had nothing. The reservoirs dried. The cattle died first, then the crops. 500,000 people began walking toward the coast. The Brazilians called them flagelados, the scourged ones. They walked hundreds of kilometers through the dust. Many did not survive. 3 continents, 3 civilizations, monsoons failing in India, rivers drying in China, rains vanishing in Brazil. All because of one shift in Pacific Ocean temperatures. The median estimate used by climate historians is 50 million deaths, one of the deadliest events in human history. And then I found the policy that changed the story. Here is the myth. The standard account frames this as a natural disaster. Climate failed. People died. No one is to blame. The British government's own Indian Famine Commission Report of 1880 does not support this. The report states explicitly, "The surplus produce of India, taken as a whole, still furnishes ample means of meeting the demands of any part of the country likely to suffer from famine." The food was there. At the peak of the mortality, while Chittu's 11 families were disappearing, the colonial government exported 320,000 tons of wheat from India to England. 320,000 tons. Loaded, shipped, sold. The climate created the emergency. The policy decided who survived it. Lord Lytton, the Viceroy of India, believed that government interference in grain markets creates a habit of dependence. No price controls, no government purchase of grain. The market must clear itself. William Digby wrote to his superiors. His letters were received and filed. No one changed the policy. On January 1, 1877, with mass mortality reports already on his desk, Lord Lytton organized the Delhi Durbar, a celebration of Queen Victoria as Empress of India. 68,000 guests, a banquet lasting a week, elephants with gilded headpieces. The photographs are in the Library of Congress. You can look at them right now. He wrote privately to London that the celebration was necessary to consolidate authority. Digby was still writing his letters. No one was replying. But it was not the grain exports that stopped me reading for an hour. It was a different document. It was about what the dying were allowed to eat. Lord Lytton's administration maintained famine relief camps. There was a ration standard. The internal communications in the India Office records refer to it by a specific name: the jail diet. The logic in the documents: if relief rations exceeded what prison inmates received, too many people would seek relief instead of returning to market labor. The famine victim's ration was calibrated to be below the caloric intake of a prisoner. And then there is the dispatch. Lord Lytton, writing privately to London, complained that relief workers in some districts were feeding people too well. Too well fed. Those exact words are in the document. The source is in the description. You can read it yourself. And here is where nature did what no one expected. The climate machine swung back. Because El Niño is a cycle. And in late 1877, the extreme heat of the Pacific collapsed. It did not return to normal. It crashed into an equally extreme La Niña. The ocean temperatures plummeted, the atmospheric pressure reversed, and the rain came. But it was not a relief. The torrential, unseasonal rains hit baked, barren soil that had no vegetation left to hold it. The water did not sink in. It washed away the remaining topsoil in massive mudslides. It drowned the seeds that had just been planted. The sudden moisture created stagnant breeding grounds across India, China, and Brazil. In their weakened states, the starving populations were hit by epidemics of malaria, cholera, and dysentery. Climatologists note that the transition from a super El Niño to a sharp La Niña is the most dangerous phase of the cycle. Nature first dried them to dust and then drowned them in disease. 50 million people died in the gap between what this climate cycle made possible and what the human systems chose to do. The weather cycle ended. The human decisions did not. They wrote the instruction. They knew what to do. In 1880, the British government published the Famine Codes, a manual for the next time. They wrote it all down. When to declare famine, how much to feed, when to open the camps. William Digby read it. He spent the rest of his life documenting what he had witnessed, trying to make sure the world did not forget. He thought he wrote a warning that could not be ignored. He died in 1904. 3 years after his death, the next major famine began. The codes were on the shelf. In 1943, 63 years later, in Bengal, 3 million people died while grain was exported into the wartime economy. The War Cabinet was informed. The codes were still on the shelf. They knew. They wrote the instructions. And twice they chose not to follow them. They wrote a warning. Twice they refused to follow it. And Digby did not live to see it. I returned to Chidu because that is the name that stays with me. Chidu's village. 17 families. 11 disappeared before the next census visit. His name survived only because William Digby decided to write it down. 50 million others did not have a Digby. An entire population, larger than the number of people living in Britain at the time, disappeared in 2 years. And the year 1877 appears in school textbooks as the year Edison patented the phonograph. 50 million people are not in the index. This was not a failure of memory. This was a decision. If a system today chose exports over your city, would you know it? Or would you just be 11 families, gone before the next census visit? The documents are public. Every source is in the description.
Were you taught about 1877 in school? Write in the comments your country and what exactly you were taught. I gather answers from around the world, and so far, I haven't found a single yes. If you think more people should know this, send this video to one person. That's how forgotten things stop being forgotten. While going through the India Office records for this video, I found a reference to a parallel set of documents from the same decade. A different colony, a different system, the same table of decisions. Except instead of grain, the column was filled with people. I finished reading. The next video is already being put together.